Hello and welcome to my opinion archive. In today's video we're going to continue my series from last time about the Sith Order throughout the timeline of Star Wars, where I discuss what the different versions of the Sith Order does good and bad. If you didn't see the first video of this series, I'm going to put a link to it in the description. Last time we discussed the Sith philosophy in general, and the pre-hyperspace war Sith Empire. And today we're going to discuss the Brotherhood of Darkness and the rule of two Sith orders, and how they function and what they did, how they differ from the other versions of the Sith Order. The Brotherhood of Darkness was created by Lord Khan, and what he did to sort of unite the Sith was that he forbade the use of the title of Darth. That's why everyone in the Brotherhood of Darkness is a Lord of the Sith. So everyone is equal, so there's no competition between the different Sith. There isn't a higher goal to aspire to, because everyone is a Lord of the Sith and everyone is equal. Now, this idea in and of itself is very good. It's a good idea to try to make equality between the Sith, so there isn't a lot of infighting in their order. But the idea really doesn't work as good as intended. It seems like Lord Khan was very blind to the dark side's very nature is that there is conflict, that people aren't equal. So the idea was very good, but it didn't really work because the Brotherhood of Darkness was still filled with a lot of Sith. There were many Sith in this order, which means they suffer from the same problem as the post-hyperspace war Sith Empire, which is that there's a lot of Sith and many small Sith can very easily band together and kill more powerful Sith, which means that the rivalry problem that the Sith have had throughout its many versions and throughout time is not really solved. It's just you don't get a bigger title from it, but there's still rivalries between Sith. There's still infighting within the Brotherhood of Darkness. One thing I think that the Brotherhood of Darkness did very wrong was that they decided to dismiss old Sith knowledge, which meant that a lot of knowledge was just going to be, it wasn't going to be taught at the academy. And many of its order's members simply didn't have knowledge that previous Sith had, because they simply didn't deem it worthy. They simply deemed it as old and outdated, which really diminishes this version of the Sith Order, because there's a lot of knowledge from the past that they don't have access to. There's Sith abilities that they don't know about, and perhaps mistakes from previous Sith orders that they simply might repeat because they don't have the knowledge, they don't acknowledge these previous Sith orders. A problem that the Brotherhood of Darkness suffers from, that many Sith orders suffer from, is the secrets. Although the official statement is that everyone is equal in the Brotherhood, it really doesn't work. One of the big secrets you can see that the Brotherhood of Darkness suffers from is Kasim, I think it's pronounced. He was the instructor in the Korriban Academy. He kept a big secret from all of his students. He simply refused to teach them how to use dual lightsabers, as in the ability to fight with two lightsabers, one in each hand. And the reason he did this was so that he could have an advantage over any of the students that was part of the Korriban Academy, which really tells you about his point of view. And this is a big problem for the Brotherhood of Darkness, because it now has a lot of members who simply aren't prepared to deal with this combat style, this fighting style, and they don't have any members of the Order who knows this style, who can fight with two lightsabers or defend against it. It's a very big secret that really keeps the Brotherhood of Darkness down, because it loses out on potentially great sword masters, great lightsaber combat masters, simply because their instructor refused to teach them a particular style of combat. Now I'm going to talk about something I think the Brotherhood of Darkness did very well. and it was the fact that they have specializations, that there are different Sith had different jobs, different abilities, different things to focus about. For instance, Sith assassins and spies, they were primarily trained to kill or capture Jedi. And when they then captured a Jedi, they would bring them to Sith Lords who were specialized in torturing and bringing them to the dark side. This meant that they have people who were specifically trained to break Jedi and make them a part of the Brotherhood, which is a very smart way to win the war against the Jedi Order. Basically turn the Jedi Order against itself. Then they had Sith warriors and marauders, which were basically focused on combat and leading troops into battle, which is of course a very important specialization to have when you are fighting a war. And I really think this is very good, because the Brotherhood of Darkness then has people who are specifically trained to do this, instead of having a bunch of Sith who just focuses on whatever role they perhaps want, whatever interest they have. So that was my analysis of the Brotherhood of Darkness. Now we're going to continue to talk about the Rule of Two era of Sith. The Rule of Two was instigated by Darth Bane as a response to some of the problems that the Brotherhood of Darkness had, and this was because Darth Bane himself had spent a lot of time thinking about the Brotherhood of Darkness and developed his own teachings about how the Sith should operate. One of the fundamental parts of the Rule of Two is that there is only two Sith at any given time, and this is a very good idea because these two Sith also are supposed to operate in secrecy, so that they aren't known to the public, and the Jedi Order and the Republic doesn't know who they are or where they are. The good thing that this achieves is that the Sith of this version of the Sith Order has a lot of time to learn Sith knowledge and information and become very strong and become very powerful. And there are no longer secrets between a master and an apprentice, because it's the master's job to teach his apprentice everything that the apprentice needs to know to become as powerful as possible. The good thing about there only being two Sith is that there's no longer a rivalry between multiple Sith. There isn't a competition. There's only the two of them, and there's only one goal for the apprentice, which is really to become powerful enough to defeat his or her master. A thing that I think is very positive that stems from this factum that these Sith have to blend in and become a part of society is that they learn other things than just the Force and using a lightsaber. They learn things like business or science. They become far more dangerous and far more clever than previous Sith who only focuses on the mystical aspects of the Force and lightsaber combat. These people learn other things they can use to defeat their enemies, other methods to manipulate and be dangerous and be a threat to the galaxy. And they learn to do it in a way where the Jedi and the Republic wouldn't see or discover them and wouldn't suspect to be attacked from this way. For instance, business, they wouldn't suspect a Sith to go in and take control over businesses and banks. And this really works because the Rule of Two was implemented in a way where the Jedi thought that they have destroyed all Sith, so they didn't really think there were any Sith left, so they weren't really planning on fighting Sith. And if they were planning on fighting Sith, then they suspected it would be like all the other versions of the Sith Order, filled with a lot of Sith ready to combat them on the battlefield. But the Rule of Two wasn't focusing on that. That's really the brilliant way it was created, so that the Jedi are not really suspecting that the enemy is dead, and if they're looking for signs for a new version of the Sith, they're looking in all the wrong places. They're looking for big groups of Darksiders gathering to become an army, well, when that is not what the new Sith are about. And they are about manipulation and scheming and That's why it works, because the Sith become a part of everyday life. But one of the big weaknesses of the rule of two Sith is that there are only, of course, two Sith. Meaning, if a Sith master dies or turns to the light side, or abandons the Sith philosophy before he or she finds an apprentice, the Sith Order is as good as dead almost. At least the rule of two. There is, of course, always the opportunity that someone finds a dark Sith holocron and starts something along the lines of the Sith. But the rule of two would be destroyed if this were to happen. And another problem is that if the Sith should somehow get discovered, although it is part of the rule of two that they should stay hidden, but if they should get discovered by the Jedi at any given point in time, then they could very easily get outnumbered. They may be very powerful because they've had enough time to train both the apprentice and the master, but if you get attacked by hundreds of Jedi, then two Sith are really going to be able to destroy all of them, and if they have the Republic with them as well, they could very easily get outnumbered. A problem that's actually addressed in the Star Wars Expanded Universe history is that what would happen if a Sith decided to betray the Sith Order during the Rule of Two. The Sith who does this is called Darth Gravid, and he goes mad and decides that the Sith Order is actually wrong. He tried to implement bits of the Jedi Order's philosophy into the Sith Order, and he just went completely mad because he couldn't find a way to make the two things match. So he starts to destroy a lot of Sith knowledge, which is really dangerous because this knowledge is irreplaceable. It's very hard to find any copies of much of the Sith knowledge because the Jedi has destroyed it throughout time. And this really sets back the Sith Order a lot because there's secrets and information that they don't know. His apprentice managed to stop him, but if there was knowledge he didn't teach it and he has destroyed that, then that knowledge is gone. And that's a really big weakness. It's almost along the lines of my previous thing that if they turn to the light or die, knowledge could get lost. The thing that I have always found really interesting about the Rule of Two is that Darth Bane implemented this rule that the apprentice has to kill the master in order to prove himself worthy of becoming the next leader of the Sith. And it has a very good intention that the apprentice has to become strong enough and powerful enough to destroy his or her master. But it doesn't really work that way in theory, because some Sith, including Darth Sidious himself, has waited until their masters were at a weak point to kill their master, which means they haven't really proven themselves superior in terms of force powers or knowledge or lightsaber combat, but just more clever, which of course is a useful skill, but they could in theory be a lot weaker than their master. For example, what Darth Sidious did was that he killed his master in his sleep. He got him drunk, and then his master went to sleep, and then Sidious killed him, which doesn't really prove that Sidious was more powerful. I believe he was, but the point is, it doesn't really correspond too well with the intention of this part of the Rule of Two. My next point isn't that much a problem with the Rule of Two in and of itself, but more the things that the Rule of Two have to take into account, which I don't think was thought about when Darth Bane created it. And that is that the Rule of Two is very good at its intended purpose, which is to take control of the galaxy, which works. Sidious managed to take control of the galaxy, but Sidious himself actually gets very bored because the Rule of Two Sith were created to be schemers and planners. They were supposed to have an enemy to outsmart, to outthink. But when you become the leaders of the galaxy, you don't have that. Not in a big way. So Darth Sidious himself actually thought that the Rule of Two was supposed to be replaced because the Rule of Two's job was to secure the galaxy to get the power, but there wasn't any idea about how to rule it. The Insidious thought that perhaps there should be another way. The Sith created as a way to think about how they should operate when they rule the galaxy. So, as I said, it isn't really a problem with the Rule of Two because it functions to make its intended purpose. But the Rule of Two needs some sort of a replacement, an idea, a plan of what to do when we have the galaxy. My next and last point is it's going to be a little bit contradictory to what I've stated in previous videos and previously in this video, that of course a lot of Sith makes for a problem because there's infighting, but the problem with the Rule of Two is that there's only 2 Sith. That's really good, as stated earlier, when you're trying to take over the galaxy, but when you have the galaxy, you need to be in many places at once, and 2 Sith Lords aren't going to be able to be everywhere at once if you have a lot of Jedi or a lot of enemies who have to be destroyed. This was, of course, addressed by Darth Sidious and Darth Vader by creating organizations such as the Inquisitorius and the Emperor's Hands, but it sort of breaks the Rule of Two. Even although these people are not actually Sith, they are trained Darksiders, and are kept back by the fact that they aren't officially Sith. So the Rule of Two, although this sort of bends the rules a bit, I think that the Rule of Two needs a continuation plan, to something to let the Sith know this is what we do when we have the galaxy. And I think it has to be put into consideration that they have to be more Sith, but not necessarily hundreds of Sith like in the previous Sith orders. Thank you for listening to this video. As always, this has been my opinion archive. I really hope you found this interesting. In the next part of this series, we're going to talk about the last big version of the Sith Order called the Rule of One. I don't know if it's a problem that I didn't state this in the beginning of the video, but I did state it in the beginning of the last video. But all information in this video is legends, which means that it doesn't have an impact on any of the future films. But I hope that you found it interesting anyway. Thanks for watching this video.